Remember, as always, our practices of humility are the two things we should remember are what are good others have done for us, and that will always keep us mindful that we need each other. The second is what bad we have done to others, and this will always keep us in a space where we're trying to improve and be better. The things we should always try to forget in our practices for developing humility are what bad others have done to us as best possible, and what good we have done for others. So we will just go through our invocation. Om Gyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Mukam karoti vachalam pangu langayate girim yat kripatam aham bande Shri Guru Dinataranam. Vanchakalpa turubhyascha kripa sunda eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Okay, so first verse, as always, is we are born not knowing, and we go to the spiritual teacher or mentor to open our eyes with the torch of knowledge, and we offer our respect. We offer sincere respects. The second is we offer our sincere respects to our spiritual teachers, and by the grace turn the dumb into eloquent speakers and enable the lame to cross mountains. And then finally, we offer our sincere respects to all those that have joined today who are seekers of the divine, who can fulfill the desires of everyone and are full of compassion for all living beings. So again, thank you so much for joining us in the early mornings and some later on in the day for this opportunity to discuss the yoga and the dark night of the soul. So if you remember from last week, where we had started was we talked about setting out on the journey. And that remember, we recalled that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So progress, the important piece is progress, not taking big leaps, and that the journey is one at a time and slow and steady. So we talked about also, if you remember, this is a great quote from Marianne Williamson. The spiritual journey is unlearning of fear and acceptance of love. And so really what we were getting at last week was just saying yes to the journey. And then we went into a little bit of what that means to everybody, what saying yes means. And then the first element, we talked about what that meant to everyone else. And then Simon, in the book, he also describes in detail, there's three parts that, based on the Bhagavad Gita, means to saying yes. And that first yes, the first element of yes was honoring the dark night as a rite of passage. And the reason why honoring the dark night as a rite of passage is so important is because there has to be an element of acceptance and acknowledgement first before we're going to traverse through the dark night. And that acknowledgement and acceptance is really important because we said that if we do the acknowledgement and the acceptance ourselves, then we're creating a safe space for others to do the same, right? And so I was thinking about this yesterday, that vulnerability for ourselves creates safety. And that honoring that dark night as a rite of passage allows someone else to make it safe to do the same. And we were talking about how important that is for today's world, because as Simon mentions later on this chapter, that oftentimes the dark night is something that's usually done in private in today's society. It's not very often talked about, and it's seen with an amount of shame. So again, we talked about this is why the honoring of the dark night is so important, is so that we can also make that space for others. Anyone have any reflections or comments from last week? All right, so we're going to go into the second element of what it means to say yes. And that second element is trusting the inner guide. Now, if everyone, I think this story is tremendous. But I'll read from the first the first section of this chapter. We're on page 110 for anyone that's following along, at least in my ebook. And it says here, situated within the very being and moved by compassion, I vanquish the darkness arising from the absence of knowledge with the effulgent lamp of knowledge. So again, this is Bhagavad Gita 10.11, and it's referring specifically to this element of the inner guide. Does anyone want to start by reading this story that comes at the beginning? Someone can feel free to start reading if they want.
I will.
Please.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6, trust your inner guide. Yes.
My apologies for being late, everyone. A little
okay.
Emergency to deal with, but yes. Hope everyone's well. Okay. Chapter 6. Trust your inner guide. He is your killer, my heart said to me. I was surprised by how clear and unambiguous the message was. It frightened me. The circumstances were odd, to be sure, but was I simply imagining the worst? It was the dead of the night, and I had just arrived in Mumbai en route to Delhi. This meant traveling from the international airport across the city to the domestic airport. My flight into Mumbai was late, so there was very little time to make the connecting flight. I couldn't wait for the next shuttle bus and had to catch a taxi immediately. One of the Air India attendants accompanied me to the airport exit and, after a brief exchange with a local driver, instructed me to follow the man. I was traveling on my own. It was 2 a.m. I accompanied the driver to his car, parked some distance away, pulling a heavy suitcase behind me. When we reached the car, I was concerned. The car had no taxi markings. It looked just like a regular car. As I got in, I noticed there was already someone in the front passenger seat. There was little time, and I had been introduced to the driver by an Air India official. So I decided to ignore the warning. Maybe this is how things rolled in Mumbai. The taxi left the international airport and entered the solitary darkness of the night. There were few cars. I felt very alone and suddenly very exposed. Are we even driving towards the airport? I wondered. It seemed to me we're heading for some remote outback. After a quarter of an hour of silence, the driver began to assert that the cost of the taxi ride would be $200. I needed to pay up now. I reminded the driver that the agreed price, as indicated by Air India attendant, was 200 rupees. But he began raising his voice, insisting I had misunderstood. To diffuse the situation, I said I would pay whatever the price was once we were at the domestic airport. At this point, I sensed the strong message from the core of my heart that I was in mortal danger. I began to recite mantras for my own protection, which I had learned in the temple monastery. These mantras are most powerful when invoked from the depths of one's being. The driver was now on his cell phone. He seemed to be arranging a meeting. After another 15 minutes of driving, we began to enter an area that was pitch black and isolated. The car slowed to a halt behind a black taxi cab. There was no one else in sight. Shall I continue?
If someone else want to read?
I can read.
Please.
I've been in that situation, by the way.
You will go into this car. We are changing taxis, the driver announced. Emerging from the black car was a burly man with a large handlebar mustache, more commonly seen in rural areas. He is your killer, my heart said to me. The circumstances were odd, to be sure, but was I simply imagining the worst? In that moment, I surrendered to my inner heart. The mantras I had been chanting had strengthened my connection to the guide within, whom I now trusted with my life to see me through this situation. A voice within, tranquil but deep like the ocean, told me to remain calm and play along. I did that. The driver popped open the boot, instructing me to shift my suitcase over to the black car. I raised it out of the boot. 40 kilos of rare, sacred books together with almost everything else I owned. In that moment, I was filled with a surge of strength and courage, adrenaline rushing through me. I lifted the large, heavy suitcase with ease and, still holding on to my carry-on, made a dash into the darkness. There was shouting. I heard the two cars start their engines in a hurry and tear away behind me in pursuit. I reached a main road, a dual carriageway with a lot of fast-flowing traffic. Suddenly, I spotted a small break in the traffic and dashed across the busy road, now running against the flow of traffic. The two cars pursued me for almost a kilometer in the other side of the road. You want me to keep going?
Sure.
At a large crossroads with traffic lights, I hopped into an auto rickshaw, a small yellow motor vehicle with 3 wheels. As the lights changed to green, I knew I had found safety. At the domestic airport, I reported what had occurred to the officials. They told me I had been extremely lucky. Pulling out a newspaper, they showed me a story that shocked me. A woman from Canada had been found dead at the side of a busy road a week ago, stripped of all her belongings, just 10 miles from the airport. She too had been traveling from the international airport in Mumbai to catch a connecting flight. She had stepped into an unmarked car, posing as a taxi. There had been giveaway signals, but what if I hadn't been alert to them? I was outnumbered 3-1. This story could have ended in several ways. The ending I experienced was the only good one. What was it that warned me so clearly and definitively? What had told me to feign cooperation? What had helped me make a dash for my life, signaling the moment to do so? I felt I had been protected. I had listened to my inner guide, and that had saved my life. On the connecting flight, I turned to the Bhagavad Gita. I opened the page where Krishna reveals his true identity to Arjuna as the inner guide and the source of all wisdom. I am seated in the hearts of all. From me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The embodiment of the wisdom of the ancients dwells in our own heart. In that sense, all wisdom is situated in our heart. We have a golden thread to this wisdom, a natural connection to the universal teacher within us. Later, Krishna shows Arjuna his form as the entirety of existence across all space and time. In this form, Arjuna sees the birth and annihilation of all beings. He sees even himself. Krishna says that this form of his has manifested from the yoga of his own being. Krishna is Vishvatma, the soul of the universe, and he is Yogeshvara, the Lord of Yoga, because he gives the results of yoga. Just as Krishna, the soul of the universe, is present within Arjuna's chariot, so too is the soul of the universe present within our heart, within the chariot of our body. We are not alone on the field of life.
Perfect.
Do you want me to keep going?
No, we'll stop there.
Okay.
Has anyone been in that situation? Or I guess, what do people think of that story? It reminded me of, if you remember this, when we were talking about that story, it reminds me of this slide, where the prince, the king, he's running away from the tiger, and he's pretty much running for his life, but he doesn't know where he's going to go. So I really enjoyed reading that story. I've known Simon for a little while. He's never told me that story, so I'm looking forward to asking him more about that story. But you can see that, that was definitely a time where he was forced to kind of go deep within. But it's amazing how those messages come through, and I'm sure everyone's had their experience of, some people refer to it as the inner voice, or something within them that's speaking to them, and that's really what we're getting at here when we're talking about the inner guide. And And we find out, we discover in the Bhagavad Gita who that inner guide is. Krishna reveals to Arjuna that that inner guide is in fact himself, that he's both within each of us, and also that he's without, meaning he's, you know, a person as well. And yeah, it's a really nice meditation to think about. There's a really nice, if people don't know who this individual is, but I really thought that this captured it really well, was if people know who Dean Ornish is, he's a physician, but he's specifically in the area of lifestyle medicine. And he says here, we all have an inner teacher, an inner guide, an inner voice that speaks very clearly, but usually not very loudly. That information can be drowned out by the chatter of the mind and the pressure of day-to-day events. But if we quiet down the mind, we can begin to hear what we're not paying attention to. We can find out what's right for us. So the question, one of the questions that I wanted us to, we can just take a couple minutes to reflect on, and we'll talk about, we can, we'll do a breakout room again, is this question here about how often do we regularly make time and space to connect first with our inner thoughts and feelings, and do we acknowledge that there's an inner guide within us? Because I think before we're starting to listen to our inner guide, there has to be there has to be a certain time and a space that we create just to be able to listen to that voice in, because we see from that quote from Dean Ornish that a lot of times it can be overcome. So yeah, I just wanted everyone to kind of just take that opportunity to think about how often they're doing this. And I'll just create a breakout room for everyone, and I'll put the question in the breakout room so everyone can chat about it. And maybe how they go about, if they have ideas on how they go about doing that, it would be really nice to share within the group. So we'll just assign, we'll assign automatically. Whoop. Create. All right, so we will go ahead. Everyone can open the room.
Hi. Hi, so I had the lovely opportunity to discuss with Christina and also then later with Rita. And what I explained to Christina is that I really find that I had the most amazing, beautiful inner wisdom and guide that guides me when I'm my clients, when I'm doing that one-to-one coaching. It is phenomenal. I just hear what the person is saying and I'm like, got it, got it, got it, got it, got it. Then when it comes to myself, and I said it to Christina, I was like, inner guide gets disturbed by all this noise in my head. And you know what I do? And you know this, Rikin, I ask my external guides. So I'll ring one person, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I won't sit quietly and calmly to listen to this inner universal wisdom. So what my conclusion was with Christina for myself, and we both discussed, and even with Rita, is about, you know, meditation is a strategy whereby one can be in tune with their inner voice. And so two things that I've written is that I need to be calm and compassionate with myself, like I am with the clients, to be able to access my inner wisdom. And the second one is I need to meditate, and I'm not meditating.
That's okay. Thanks, Avni. I will say that for myself, I've asked the question many times to the inner guide, and I'll be honest, the answer is not there. It doesn't come. So I have to ask my inner guide to be so explicit. And I found that the way Krishna has manifested the answers or the wisdom for me, is, I mentioned Avantika, is that this different people in my life will come across and bring the same message. And for myself, who's maybe not as finely tuned to hear the voice, because I haven't been able to sometimes separate what's in my mind and what's coming from, the super soul, or that inner guide, is this having, having people that come with that same message and, thump me on the head saying that same thing.
And that's my client. I find myself talking to my clients saying, Avni, take note. Avni, take note. They come to me with issues or challenges or goals that actually are so close to my life. So yeah, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else wanted to add anything to share?
You did mention, the other boy. So from my perspective, I've been telling people for what feels like decades, as I was mentioning to Ami, about sort of listen to the inner voice. It's usually quiet, it doesn't speak loudly, and it only really speaks once. So I have been in tune with it, and my mom and a number of her siblings also feel energy quite a bit. So I've sort of been exposed to it. And I think a lot of us are, but we sort of shut it down because society tells us it's not normal. For me, I sort of just left it open and always acknowledged it, even though I come in and out of realizing it because you get busy with life and you get disconnected. But I'm traditionally been aware of it and do my best to listen.
That's great. And Paul, I was just wondering, or anybody else, has anyone found that there's sometimes a struggle between what's happening in their external world and what the inner guide is telling them? I find that sometimes there can be resistance to necessarily what the message is, or sometimes, we keep going down a certain path without fully embracing what the message might be. And I just wanted to kind of explore, why that conflict or that kind of incoherence comes about.
I think it always comes about because of fear, basically. I think there's fear whenever we're not following what's in that inner voice. For me, anyways, it always comes down to not trusting that and being fearful of what the outcomes would be for following it.
Yeah, such a great point. Fear for sure is definitely there because it requires some courage to follow the advice, I find many times as well, because it's not usually going to be what is popular or the norm, and usually might have to go against the grain, right? Shivani?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, at least sometimes in my experience, you're going through a situation, there are multiple possible outcomes. And even though, you tell yourself you're open, you're just going to let things happen, you might want things to go a certain way, or you might want a certain outcome. Maybe that's the best possible outcome given your scenario. And so because of that, when things go another way, you're like, ooh, I don't really want this. And so you're not as open to the feedback as you should be. I've definitely experienced that, seen that happen.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that we have kind of a way that we've thought about that the advice is going to unfold, and when it doesn't unfold that way, we kind of close up to the advice that we're getting?
At times, or sometimes we may just not be open to things happening a different way, because even if it's like a subconscious thing, that you don't even realize that this is what you want, you may be less open. I think that's why it's important to sometimes talk to an unbiased third person, just to get a more clear view on things from someone who's not leaning a certain way, that can help open your eyes to see how things really are versus how you want to perceive them to be.
Yeah, that's great. It's definitely something that has been a big part of my journey as well. So thanks for sharing that. Who we have? Ida, and then Stacy, and then Avantika.
As Paul, actually, this one's for you. So, and also thank you again for last night, Paul. Really appreciate it. So the question I have for you, Paul, because as I was listening to you, you talked about how this is something that you've been doing for a very long time, and you're still connected to that energy. What do you do when you feel it? Your inner voice tells you the truth, and the truth being, it whispers to you. It whispers to you, right? What to do or which path to take. But then on the external side, on the outside, there's just so much noise because there's so much information, or so many, let's call it so many voices. But then that inner voice is a lot stronger. And then so there's an internal conflict. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I think you have. Then there's an internal conflict that happens because you've got the inner voice, but then the outside noise is just so loud. And the outside noise is so loud, when there's so many people who have an agreement about a narrative. Yeah. It then brings this conflict in. How do you overcome that, Paul, and listen to that inner voice if you have been in that position before, if you have experienced that before?
But I think we all have been. So from my perspective, the inner voice tells us what we know is right and wrong for us, or guides us in a certain direction. I know that I was expressing on one of these recent calls with Ricken about, something is really, really good, but for some reason I'm going inwards, and it didn't make any sense. And I'm okay with it. So I guess I need to use a specific example. So generally speaking, I listen to the voice and I start acting on it. Sometimes I don't, and then eventually I end up regretting it. So as that cycle goes on, I try to listen more. It's a guide. It's not a dictator, right? So you basically need to balance. I find I need to live true to sort of what I believe I should be doing. And I haven't come up to a major misalignment until purchasing the cottage that I'm now at. And normally, and I think Ricken had said, most people go inwards into a dark night when there's a disconnection between your false ego and reality. And I'd actually want to dig into why he said, well, yours is a little different because you're not actually breaking the false ego, you're getting more in touch with your real one. So I don't know what that means. And really, I think following your inner guide requires going down the path and trusting it. I don't know if that answers your question.
It confirms.
Thanks, Paul. Stacy?
So I have been doing this ritual that I started like a month ago. I took I took an online class on it, and it's really around channeling, really, or getting kind of going within yourself, right, to find answers. And what I've started doing is just kind of doing a short kind of meditation and getting the energy flowing. And then I just kind of ask my soul, what it wants to tell me. And then I have my journal, and it's like the pen just starts to flow. And I have all these paragraphs that I've developed for the past month or so, and they're really amazing what's in them. And I'm kind of getting answers that I need through this method. And it's really life-changing, honestly. I'm hearing from myself, or whatever you want to think. I mean, just, the path that I need to be on. It's more general, like it says, I want you to know that all is well. You must calm yourself and just know that you're on the path. You have felt off and tired because you are pushing. You are pushing so hard, trying to be all. You must let go to reach great heights. You are getting there. You must keep going, but stop to enjoy. This is your time.
Wow, thank you, Stacey.
Anyway, it's really deep, and it's hard to talk about, but it's been really cool.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's really personal, and it reminds me of one of the affirmations that I have in the morning is you're stepping in for one of my affirmations is you're stepping into your greatness now. The time is now, right?
Yes.
And so it's one of the affirmations that I have in the morning time. But thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Avantika, I know you had something you wanted to share, if your hand was still up. No? Okay. So yeah, this was a great discussion, and really the whole prompt for this question was to get people to reflect on how often they're doing it. If they're not doing it enough, to hopefully do it more, and hopefully everyone has a means by which they, a practice that they do it on a regular basis. Developing one is extremely powerful, as Stacey demonstrated, because I was just saying in our group that many times there's information coming to us, but if we don't still our mind, still ourselves enough to be able to welcome the information, we can miss out a lot of things. But one question that I wanted to kind of also just end with was, and I brought this up in our group, but what we can just talk about as a group is, how do we know we're taking guidance of our mind versus our inner guide? And the Bhagavad Gita is very, it goes into great depth on, the mind and the inner guide. That inner guide, as Simon mentioned, is that divinity that's within all of us, the super soul that's giving us information, but there's also a mind that are feeding us our thoughts based on our experiences. And I will, I'm curious to what everyone else has to say on this, because the Gita also shares, very specifically, how we can, differentiate the two. And does anyone have any thoughts or any comments to share? Because this to me is really trying to, it's not maybe necessarily a linear thing or an easy thing to pick out, but even just thinking about our thoughts versus really that internal guidance, and how one goes about differentiating the two. Avantika, go ahead.
I think there's a couple of things. The first one, like I shared in the group, that the inner guide is different from our instincts. Instincts are something that every animal has, and humans as animals have a sense of self-preservation. We understand and recognize risk and threat, and we have the ability to remove ourselves. And a lot of people not even in touch with their instincts. So that's the first point. But it's generally, our wiring, which kind of leads us to our instinctive understanding of what is the place where we should go and what is the place where we shouldn't go. The inner guide is something much more, in my perspective. The inner guide is something which helps us even rise above our instincts. And it is where, it is the final form of surrender, where you just literally allow yourself to channel your soul and the wisdom of the entire cosmic collective, which wants to channel through you, the purer and purer you get. And that's really when you know the difference, because if your pattern has been to always run away, to avoid certain things, to be fearful of certain situations, to have stereotypes about certain categories of people and stuff like that, it is the inner guide. That's your mind. That's your amygdala, basically. Your inner guide is the one which will actually tell you to go into situations which you haven't gone into before. It will tell you to take a leap of faith. It will tell you to trust more. So it's not always tell you to avoid situations. Actually, your inner guide is guiding you also into places that you've particularly never been before. So that's really the difference between the two to me. And finally, what I wanted to say is that a lot of the noise that I've found in my life has come when, as a light worker, my first step was to find out what my purpose and passion is. And then I got into something which I call the light worker's ego, where I realized that I kind of felt like I have to do it all. I have to rescue the whole world, and I have to kind of, be have some grand purpose and some grand, something that I have to chase after, which is no different from the non-light worker's ego. And the surrender really comes in, like, it's okay to just be, just having kind of being in a place of love, surrendering into a place of having these intentions for the world and doing something small consistently every single day and making a difference to that one person that maybe, was not on your strategic map, but was right across the corner from you. That is so much more important. So it's really about not taking yourself very seriously as this grand, big rescuer of the world and understanding you're just a small piece and having the humility, just like, initially we have to come into the humility of understanding we're mortal, not immortal. Eventually we have to come into the humility of understanding we are just a small piece in this whole big machinery and not all of it. So that's what I had to say.
Wow, thank you, Avantika. Yeah, to recognize it, and it's generally a big blow to the ego when we come to that realization that, things aren't going to turn out as planned, and, perhaps, I mean, thinking big is a positive thing, but when it doesn't manifest, then being satisfied with our daily consistent wins, which might be small, right? It's such a great realization. Thank you. Ida?
Thanks, Avantika. There was a lot of gems there. For me, it's when I feel the discomfort in my body. And it's not just my physical body, so it's not a pain in any part of my body, but there's this discomfort. So my mind tells me one thing, and I'm trying to agree to it. But even when I agree to where I have experienced this, internally I feel that it just doesn't feel right. It's like, call it a gut feeling or a sensation in the body. That's when I know that there is that conflict. And I've experienced it where I've leaned towards the mind and I've gone, as Paul says, it's I wish I hadn't done it. I wish I didn't go that way. But when I've actually stopped and in that silence just really be present and feel it, then my truth comes up, it shows up. And that actually then is the truth. It shows me the truth. So that's how it's worked for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Ida.
Yeah.
Anybody else wanted to share? So I wanted to bring together what a lot of people had been saying, especially one of the comments that Avni had made, and I'm just trying to locate the verse, but I couldn't recall it specifically. But the Bhagavad Gita, it comments that we have, unless there's a certain level of purification of the heart within ourselves, it's in fact very, very difficult to differentiate the inner guide and the thoughts of our mind. And I think that's corroborated by the fact that people say that our, things are evolving because, again, we're learning. Sometimes we go down a road we potentially, is maybe not best for us. But again, everything hopefully is an opportunity to learn. But that until we get to that certain level of purification, we should regularly approach either a mentor or a circle of mentors to check, right? And that there should be a process of, there should always be a checking process in our life of the messages that we're getting should also then match those of our, our near and dear ones. And again, we mentioned who we're taking guidance from, someone who knows us, loves us, and can, is in a position to help us, right? We talked about those three elements of who the right people are, who the right person is to take guidance from. And so, yeah, it just speaks to, it speaks to what Avni was mentioning about her asking others. I don't think there's, anything wrong with asking others to check the, necessarily things that are coming up within ourselves. And this just brings us to the point of just, it's important to have that circle of trust, have, even if it's one or two mentors that we go to help, soundboard things that are potentially, we're trying to differentiate within ourselves. Because I genuinely feel that the inner guide, that super soul Krishna, will send the messages, that they're both there internally within us, but then they also manifest externally. And that's the Bhagavad Gita's advice for this. But again, as Avantika mentioned, there has to be a process of purification, of a practice. There has to be a practice for our purification. And that's why this process of chanting mantras is so powerful, because this is in fact our process of purification, to be able to cut through the mind, all the thoughts that come there, all the unwanted qualities or anarthas that we're trying to uproot within us, that we've discussed, to be able to have that purity of heart to really access that inner guide. So, the process has to be, the practice should always be there for purification. And at the same time, while we're undergoing that process of purification, we have the systems of checks and balances. So that is, that's the overall wisdom that the Gita is sharing to help us. And we talked about this 3-point checking system is in the yoga wisdom. They have always for major decisions, and I try to practice as much as possible. But we have our wisdom text, we have our mentors, and then we also have our spiritual seeking friends, right? Not just any friend, but the people who are also on that journey, on that similar journey. And that if we have this 3-point system of checks and balances, that there should be a certain amount of corroboration and what you could call, what is the word I'm looking for? Triangulation of that message, and that these 3 things can support that the inner guide that's within us, also giving us messages and helping us check. Because I will definitely say that there's so much we're being pulled with in the world, so many energies that the world's bring to us every day, that it's not always an easy practice, and it is quite it's quite a advanced way of living, where we're constantly getting that message, and we know that it's the correct message. Hiba, please share.
Just I was thinking about the timing to do this practice and to set these intentions. For myself, I was unconsciously doing it, but during morning time, because when the first thing is with the gratitude that now I was sharing with Stacy that we can do it, because usually somehow we do it. We have a lot of thoughts coming, because we have sometimes I go and re-sleep, so I'm not conscious. So these are the flow of ideas, and this inner voice that you're hearing, really the true one and the simplest one and the purest one. This is for me. Honestly, I got guided, and I had a lot of ideas that even if I stay a lot of time thinking about it, even after a meditation, I will not reach to that point. This is it. It's very powerful this time. I don't know what's the power of it, but at least, it's... I have good results and positive, path after that.
Yeah, and we'll get into this, but the Bhagavad Gita talks about different times of the day. They're broken up into different modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, and that there's a specific potency of energy that's invested in those morning hours, that we can develop a stillness that's not possible in any other time of the day. And it's just the way the creation has been made, that that the time for that connection at its deepest place is going to be in those morning hours to cultivate that practice. So there's a stillness that is inherently there. So I always say that if we can take whatever practice we have into those morning hours, and once upon a time, when I was living, I remember when in the monastery, when I was living there in India, their morning practice starts at 4 a.m. So everybody's up at 3:30. And my gosh, if people try that on a regular basis, it's so extremely powerful, because inherently the energy, it's just built into the energy of that time of the day. So, I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, and I know everyone has experienced that as well.
Yeah, but is it not just only the energy of that timing? Is that some certain hormonal in our body as a human? It's a combination. This is what I'm not sure about what I'm saying, but this is what I'm trying to as well to think loudly, that you have these external, energy and everything, and at the same time it should be something biological in our body as a human that make this combination. Because just as sorry, I just wanted to highlight this point. I wanted to.
Yeah, I haven't ever thought about it something being within us, but always just that clarity of mind. The mind is the stillest in those morning hours, and yeah, I know everyone has probably gotten up very early in the morning at some point, and if you've ever gone for even a walk, you can feel how when the traffic's not there and the horns aren't honking, and there's just that silence is there, that it's meant for this type of practice and inquiry. Rita?
Yeah. What I wanted to say was another way that sometimes I find in terms of listening to that inner voice is if I do listen to it, and then if there's a feeling of peace within me, or a feeling of energy to go forward with whatever it's telling me, like I'm really excited about it. So sometimes when I'm listening to my inner voice, those are signs that it's the way for me to go, that there's a sense of, even though sometimes I am afraid to do it, but there's still this energy that's there that guides me to do it. So for me, sometimes tuning into whether I'm feeling that peace, and sometimes there's a difference too, because I can be at peace and still be afraid to do it. So it's interesting the different emotions that are inside us that come forth. And of course, I don't always get it right, but those are some of the things that came to mind as we were talking about it.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. It's those, the conflicting emotions are always, I mean, the fact that you recognize them, I think is a very, very, very powerful process as well, because I think sometimes we have emotions and we don't maybe recognize them, and then sometimes I'm sure people have experienced that emotions in fact will lead to in fact sickness and illness within us, right? These emotions actually get caught in the body, and they will manifest sometimes in the form of pain or some type of illness. I've definitely found that. So Christina?
Hello. Yeah, just wanted to shortly reflect to that. I mean, this morning flower or something like this, which very speaks to me. But I'm more like I feel in these moments that I do not know. It's like you are connected to all the creation and everything. It's in the mornings, that's where I disappear. So it's just like you just recognize it's something much more bigger. It's mine, because for me the challenge more like okay, where is this part of ego and a mind and something is bigger than you, and that's exactly the moments where I more feel that is less of me and more of something. So I'm just trying to find a way in that in this regard. So.
And the yoga texts, they're so specific. They say that this time in the morning hours, it's referred to as the Brahma Muhurta. The Brahma Muhurta refers to the 90 minutes before the sun rises. It's a very specific time that they even refer to when that most potent time of the day is. It's before, in fact, the sun rises, and it's so powerful that they've actually designated a name for that time of day. So on that note, we will wrap up. There's 3 things that I wanted to just announce. The first is I wanted just for us to take a moment to wish Hiba a happy birthday, because it just passed. Happy birthday, Hiba.
Happy birthday,
Hiba.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy-
Thank you. It's lovely. Thank
All
you.
the best.
And
Thank you.
And then the second part, the second thing that I wanted to just mention is that for those that had tuned in May, Satchidanand Swami had given us a practice of mantra meditation, and we had started been doing it on a weekly basis just to continue the practice. We're going to start it up again. If for those Paul and I had met a couple times this week, and we're going to meet tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. before the Titan Zoom call. So if anyone wants to meditate together and have this practice together, please join us. If people don't know much about it, we can always share the recording from Satchidanand Swami last year, and we can also share how to go about it if no one's ever done it before. So we're going to have that tomorrow morning. And then the third piece was just to, again, reiterate and mention the retreat that's going to happen November 4th. I know did people have any specific questions around it? I know maybe Stacy had to go. But it is for sure happening, and it's over the course of a weekend. And I sent a little bit of what to expect with the retreat. Does anyone have any specific questions on it? No. Stacy, did you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah, so I was just wondering what times, like, would we need to arrive the day before and leave?
No, yeah, so it
after...
so it starts Friday, and I'm pretty sure the start time will be Friday afternoon. It'll be Friday afternoon, evening. I think for the possibility to let people kind of arrive in from, or sorry, I meant to say, it will start Friday morning and allow if people arrive Thursday evening, that would be fine.
Okay, yeah, because it was saying the 4th through the 8th. So yeah, if we could just get the details a little bit. I mean, I'm interested in looking into it, but
yeah, perfect.
Wanted to, yeah.
And then it will finish Monday morning on the 11th, or
Okay.
sorry, the 8th.
The 8th.
Christina, did you have well, your hand was up. Was that something you wanted to ask? No? Okay. Anyways, this has been a really, really powerful session. And yeah, Ida, did you want to just put a plug in again for tomorrow?
Titan Zoom, that's right. That time of the week has come round. When? Tomorrow, Friday the 8th. What time? 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. What time will it be for me? 10 p.m. I'm turning up, so show up, guys.
Yeah.
That's my plug.
And for those that want to join for meditation, Paul, maybe you can drop the link and we can use that one for tomorrow.
On the WhatsApp, not here.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, Paul, you're muted.
Yes, I'll create a meeting invite, and then I will put it up on the WhatsApp group.
Perfect. All right, everyone.
Is that possible just to add one of the previous recording, as it will be my first time?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I will share the recording if people wanted to see what it was about. No problem.
Is it at the same time as this? So is it?
Yeah,
is it 6
same
p.m.
time.
there? Okay, I get really confused. So it's your time, this time, tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah.
Love you all. See you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.